So there's still a lot of questions about this recent U.S. military strike against Venezuelan traffickers in the Caribbean. I mean, for starters, are there really 11 people in that boat? Because that seems like a lot. Anyways, today we're chatting with Sal Mercogliano of What's Going On with Shipping. I'm sure many of you follow his YouTube channel, and personally, Sal's been a great source for me trying to better understand the details around the Houthi campaign in the Red Sea and now the U.S. naval activity off the coast of Venezuela. We talk about the challenges of tracking down these go-fast boats as they approach the United States, the unique, relatively new mission set the Marines are likely conducting here, the impact to international shipping lanes, and more. I'm really grateful to Sal for taking the time to answer all of these questions. And again, for anybody interested, his channel will be linked in the description below. And with that, let's get to the conversation. All right, Sal, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, man. Looking forward to getting your take on some of the Venezuelan news in recent days.
I appreciate you having me on, Preston.
So I did watch your video, great breakdown. We'll have that linked in the description below of what we know so far. And that was about a day ago. There's not really any new information from what I'm tracking, but you mentioned a few things in there that I wanted to just get some clarification on because I have no idea. First off, you talked about these go-fast boats, kind of describing what was hit in the strike. Is it those can reach the United States, like from Venezuela? They have the range to get to the United States? Do I understand that correctly?
Well, that's the big question on this boat. I mean, when you look at the size of this boat and the type of boats, now we see those type of go-fast boats usually closer into the United States to be able to get in low under the radar, fast to land. This boat, I have some questions about that because I don't think it has the range. And we don't know where this boat was attacked. We know it's in international waters, 12 miles off the coast, somewhere in the Caribbean. So severely doubt that this boat is heading directly for the United States without some sort of intermediary stop or maybe an offload where they were heading. The boat wasn't going very fast at the time that we saw it. The initial video we saw, it was kind of just trudging along. It wasn't really going extremely fast. But the second video we saw, or the second half of the video where they actually hit the vessel, going a lot faster at that time. But these boats are designed for long range, faster speed, low in the water, built out of wood or fiberglass so that they can evade radar. They're really designed to be masked within the waves, so they're hard to detect.
And the number of people in the boat has been something that's drawn a lot of speculation. One of the challenges right now, and I'm sure we're going to get into this, is we essentially have the statement from President Trump and the video that came out. Outside of that, there's not been a lot of details, so it's allowed a lot of room for speculation in any direction that people want to take it. And one of the questions is around the number of people in the boat. The number presented was 11. The video is too grainy for me to really pick that apart. Does that seem like a lot for you in this case, or what's your interpretation there?
It is. I mean, looking at the video, I mean, I can see anywhere from about 6 to 8 in the boat. So there are more people in that boat than typical. If you talk to, and I have talked to some Coast Guard officers and some naval officers who are involved in anti-drug operations, usually what they're seeing is about 2 to 3 in the boat, tops. That's usually what you have because you want enough to basically operate the boat 24/7 if they're operating. You don't want to put more people in the boat because the more people you put in, the more weight that offsets either fuel or cargo you want to carry. 11 is a lot, and we get that from the president's statement out on Truth Social that he said that. So we don't know if it's one boat or multiple boats he hits. That's the other thing, too, is like we're just not 100% sure, is this an operation that injected other boats? We have the one video where we see it, but again, I have issues about that, too. Is this a drug-running boat? Is this human trafficking? Is this, are they smuggling something else? We don't know. Definitely more than 2 people in this boat, which is not typical.
Okay. Now, you talked about how these made of fiberglass, go-fast boats designed to not be detected by any sensors, but we've got this overhead video, and it's standing out clear as day, right? So is it a lack of resources, or what is the reason that we're not able to see these coming? Maybe I'm making myself sound silly, not recognizing how big the Gulf of Mexico is and the area we need to protect, but it seems like we should be able to have aircraft overhead spotting these at a distance. Is that just not happening or hasn't happened?
It is a lot of traffic out on the ocean. Again, most people don't. You go to a marine traffic app like I used on my video where I show you where all ships are around the world. Those are the ones that are squawking through their automatic identification system. But smaller boats, and this boat is a typical type of almost like fishing style boat you would see. Now, most fishing boats don't have 300 horsepower outboards on the back of them. That's the difference we're seeing in this boat. But, when you look at a boat like this is common throughout the Caribbean. So you would see these boats everywhere. And, to go out and identify every target out there, it's like picking up traffic on a busy interstate and trying to find, not just, the blue car, but the blue car with the specific license plate and being able to get it out of that huge crowd. So it requires a lot of surveillance. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen the deployment of such a large naval presence down there. Everyone's focusing on the warheads and the Tomahawk cruise missiles that are carried on these ships. But the key thing here is sensors. I mean, again, they're providing a lot of tracking. We're seeing the deployment of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, a cruiser, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. But all of those can put aerial sensors up in the ground. They have their own sensors on the ships. Plus, we have drones both afloat and aerial. So what we're doing is it's kind of blanketing the Caribbean here and detecting these vessels. What I'm really interested in is if they were 100% sure that this is a drug-carrying boat, they must have tracked this from point of launch and have been observing it the entire time. And that's the type of thing that I think would alleviate a lot of the questions about taking out this target as quickly as they did without stopping it. I posted a video just this morning from July where the Coast Guard stopped a very similar style boat, but they used a Coast Guard helicopter and a Coast Guard sniper. Probably some of the best snipers in the world are in the U.S. Coast Guard. Most people don't think about this. But they were able to shoot out the outboard motor from a helicopter with a Barrett 50 caliber sniper rifle. It's an impressive shot in a helicopter on a boat going. And so there are ways to stop this boat. Again, this gets into what are the rules of engagement out here in the Wild Wild West, which is international waters.
Yeah, and that opens a can of worms that I think we're starting to see explored more in the media right now, which is the justification for this strike. You had mentioned before we started that some friends of yours had talked about an increase in arrests happening off the coastline already. As in, does that mean an increase in the last few months, in the last few years, or what was that rough timeline?
Yeah, we've seen, since President Trump came in, we've seen a massive influx of vessels, both Navy and Coast Guard, into the southern border region. Now, we've seen that off the coast of Mexico and the Pacific and in the Gulf side, but we've also seen it down in the Caribbean. And, we just had a Coast Guard cutter come in with a massive haul of impounded drugs that just came in. So there is a big presence down in and around this region to interdict drugs. And it's definitely been escalated. We're definitely seeing that happen right now. There have been questions being raised by people I've talked to about, okay, we're getting these busts, but we're not getting the prosecutions from the Department of Justice. Are we getting the follow-up justice on this? What makes this much different is, again, this boat is being claimed to be out of Venezuela. The designation of Maduro as a problem for the United States with a bounty on his head, and then the designation of TAD as a terrorist organization. So, I mean, that creates all different rules of engagement at this point. So you're not just dealing with narco smuggling here, you're dealing with terrorists. And that changes how the military is going to operate and whether or not, prosecution or, prosecution of a target is going to come in. And that's what we're seeing. This is what we're not getting a clear message from. We had the Secretary of State, Rubio, come out and say that we're sending a message to Maduro. And this does send a message. If the message to drug runners are going to be, you're going to catch whatever it was that they caught, a Hellfire or whatever it was that they caught, that's going to send a message very quickly through them about transiting through the region.
Yeah, people can poke a million holes in my rationale here because when bad people get killed by the U.S. military and they're planning on doing bad things to American citizens, I'm here for it, and I will stand behind strikes we've carried out against Islamic State and Al-Qaeda leadership around the world, even though those at times can be questioned whether or not we have the justification to do so. I'm nervous every time it happens that this is just what we do now, and I don't know. I think there will be hopefully there's some conversation about this and determine exactly what the justification is so we can, is there anything in the past that you would point to that's similar to this? The international waters thing to me makes this very unique. Do the Somali pirates, maybe, is that a fit?
Well, I mean, if you follow my channel, I've been harsh on the Houthi and their attacks against commercial shipping. I mean, this has been going on now since the end of 2023. And one of the things I highlight is the fact that the Houthi are targeting commercial ships doing right of innocent passage. They do not have justification under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which is the rule that governs international shipping and international waters. Remember, U.S. territory only goes out 12 miles, and same thing for Venezuela and all countries. That's it. When you go beyond 12 miles, you're in international waters. It's the wild, wild west. And, when we did operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had the kind of the sanctions of the governments in those countries to conduct those operations, or we were operating under an authorization of the use of military force. This is a bit different because, again, there are rules under UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, which unfortunately the U.S. has not ratified. We're like the one country on the planet that have not ratified this treaty. We operate under it, but it's kind of ambiguous. There's an Article 108, which talks about illegal traffic in narcotic drugs, but it talks about working with the flag state of the vessel to stop it. But, does Venezuela claim this vessel? Have we heard Venezuela claim this vessel? This is the dicey thing. If Venezuela doesn't claim this vessel, then whose vessel is this? It's got to be registered somewhere. And if it's not registered, that makes it a stateless craft. And it raises the question of, does the U.S. have the jurisdiction to stop this vessel on the high seas? We're seeing a very similar thing happening up in the Baltic right now with tankers carrying Russian oil that are not registered in a country. Do the states in the Baltic have the right to stop vessels? Now, they're not shooting at them. They are threatening them. They're telling them to stop and get boarded. And that's the question. And we don't know. We just don't know what the TikTok here is, the timeline of the event. Did they signal this boat to stop? Was there communication with them? Was there a shot across the bow? Was there a shot that was fired from the boat at them? We just don't know. And, that raises the whole issue here. Or was this just a targeting of a boat that left Venezuela heading potentially to a Caribbean island to offload that cargo for later distribution into the United States? We don't know. There's so many questions here. When I did my video the other day, I got it too. I got it pinged by everybody, but I was trying to stay on fact of what we knew. The problem is it's what we don't know can fill up hours of YouTube videos.
And to be fair, we're sitting here saying, well, we need to understand the justification for this strike. And in a way, that's kind of asking for what is likely very sensitive intelligence of if they're tracking that boat from the point it left Venezuela, that means in some way, shape, or form, we know the exact location of these trafficking routes. That's not going to the New York Times. It should not go in the New York Times anytime soon. So I don't know exactly how we would get the level of detail that maybe right now would answer all of those questions as we're sitting here asking for it.
No, I think you're exactly right on that. I think one of the things that, I said, and I think it's true, is if the U.S. military gave the president and the National Command Authority, like, this is a drug running boat, then as well as I do, that there is intelligence that backs that up. It's not just one or two people. It is a myriad of agencies and people that are going through it. Have we made mistakes in the past? Yes, we have. There's no doubt about that. We've done things in the past. However, this is a place that's gotten a lot of attention recently, Venezuela. There's a large presence right now monitoring what's going on in and around that region. The Coast Guard operates in this region all the time. One of the things I mentioned is that the Coast Guard would be ingrained in all of this. The Coast Guard is the law enforcement detachment for the United States at sea. So even if this is a naval presence, a marine presence, Air Force, you're going to have Coast Guard involved in here because that's our port state control. They're the ones that are really the other element that's involved. And I think there would have been a check on this the entire way. It raises a lot of questions. The number of people in the boat, the type of boat, the fact that that boat probably wasn't coming directly to the United States. If it's in the Caribbean, very unlikely because of the range and size of that boat. But again, we just don't know. The reason that boat wasn't going as fast as some people would argue is that boat doesn't need to go that fast at that moment. It goes fast when it gets closer to land to make the run in. It's got a cruise, so you don't run at full speed when you're trying to stretch your fuel and go a long distance, which is what we see. They probably had no idea they were being observed at that moment. As our intelligence gathering can be pretty good. That was a pretty redacted video we saw with not a lot of data on it. And again, that could have been from, right overhead to several miles away with that boat having no idea what was about to happen.
Random aside here, Sal, but do you either have or you are still doing some work with the Coast Guard Academy? Is that right?
I don't do it with the Coast Guard Academy. I actually do with Navy Academy and the Merchant Marine Academy. So I'm teaching a course right now for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy on maritime industry policy.
The Coast Guard in mind. I'm still going to tell a feel-good story then. I was at I thought it would land more here, but I was at a recruit, or there's a like a local college fair they do every year here in Murfreesboro, and I was there for West Point, telling parents and families about what the academy's like, and we were the only service academy there, and so a lot of people come up and ask about the other academies, and there was a dad that could not have been more proud of his son that just graduated from Coast Guard, and he just would not stop talking about it and like how great it is and how much he loves New England or what is it, New London,
New
Connecticut, and
London.
just like I'm trying to talk to the kids that are thinking about their future college, and this dad was just beaming with pride. It was really cool. Um,
I love the U.S. Coast Guard. I deal with the Coast Guard more than probably almost any other agency because I talk so much about shipping now, and I get to interact with the Coast Guard. And you went to West Point. I taught at West Point. I deal with Navy Academy, and I help teach at the Merchant Marine Academy. But I got to say, Coast Guard is really one of the most unsung, underrated agencies in the U.S. government. I think they thrust so much responsibility onto their junior enlisted and junior officers so much. I mean, you're commanding a cutter, when you're an O1, O2, or maybe an E5 or an E6. And I mean, you're out there in full force. And it's a small agency. It's smaller than the police department in New York City, yet they have a global presence around the world. It's a really amazing. If you see a Coastie, Semper Paratus, they do a fantastic job.
they've got to all know each other too, right? You stay in long enough, they know everybody, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a little incestuous at times because everybody does know each other. They all, they if they don't know them, they know somebody who knows somebody. Being in the Coast Guard is like at some point you're going to be in Alaska. Everybody goes to Alaska in the Coast Guard. You're always going to be stationed in Alaska or Miami. That's the other one. You're going to be in Florida. That tends to be the other one. So you go from the extremes of heat to cold with the Coast Guard. And again, Coast Guard is, I love the boat cops as we call them in the Merchant Marine a lot of times because I mean they're like firefighters. They run into danger all the time. They're the ones who you're in trouble. They're going to come get you. But again, their presence right now is really crucial. And the problem has been that the Coast Guard has been underfunded, undercut quite a bit over the years. Their budget, their resources. I mean, they're running around the Caribbean right now in 50-plus-year-old cutters. The program to replace them has been delayed. It's been really a lot of problems with that. And you see them out there in the forefront. It is a very difficult job to stem this flow of narcotics coming to the United States. But one of the ways you try to stem it is you stem it at the demand side and you stem it at the supply side. Because when it's in between those two, it's really hard to get. And so that's one of the reasons I think you're seeing this very big presence down in the Gulf, in the Caribbean, by the U.S. military and by U.S. Coast Guard and other agencies too. Let's not forget DEA, and there's a whole batch of other federal agencies down there, and working with allies too and doing it. It's a big presence. But this shot was meant, I think, to be a big announcement. I think the reason they released it as quick as they did, and the president talked about it, is they want to announce that, listen, we're going to go to war against the drug cartels. And I think that's what this is. It's going to cause problems because, again, this is international waters and you're targeting a vessel on the high seas. You've got to be able to back that up. And there's going to be some challenges about that.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about the destroyers having or the ships having the sensors down there. There's been so much focus on the offensive capability, and then of course the first like big footage we have out of this is a kinetic strike. So the conversation is sticking with offensive capabilities. But I had a question about the Marine detachment that is there because I don't know exactly. You know that this range of possibilities, everything from regime change and invasion all the way over to just a show of force. Personally, I think I don't think the resources are there for an invasion. I don't think that's in the cards. But how are we explaining 800 Marines? What's their role, do you think, in this?
Well, I mean, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, a battalion-sized task force. You've got that Marine battalion that's there. Then you add the Air Wing that's there, Harrier jump jets, V-22 Ospreys, AH-1 Viper helicopters, and more importantly, 3 platforms. So you got 3 ships there, 2 LPDs, and the Iwo Jima, the big deck aircraft carrier. It gives you a lot of flexibility out in the Caribbean to cover a huge area. And if you want to start taking down some of these craft and some of these vessels, then all of a sudden you have this capability that exists out there. I don't think, my personal view is, okay, Marines are great. They're fantastic, but you're not going to take a battalion of Marines into Venezuela. Yeah, it's going to be, if it's anything, it would be the forefront of a larger, but I don't think that's happening. What you can do with this Marine Expeditionary Unit is cover the coast of Venezuela. You could take down Venezuelan ships. You could take down Venezuelan oil platforms. You can do a lot out there to interdict shipping and trade. It's also out there to protect, I would argue, U.S. shipping and trade. One of the things the Houthi have demonstrated is that a non-state actor can really put a hurt on global shipping. I mean, the Houthi have been enough to kind of divert about 10% of world ships around Africa. There's a big shipping lane that goes right past Venezuela. It's coming around the Cape of Good Hope. It's heading up into the Gulf to U.S. oil and grain platforms to load out there. Big fear that Venezuela may take targets at that. And so this provides some coverage for that, gives you the potential to strike or counterstrike against any offensive action taken by the Venezuelans. It puts you in a position where you can launch those. We talk about U.S. aircraft carriers being 4.5 acres of U.S. sovereign territory. Well, each of those amphib vessels have flight decks. They can operate off them. You can use them as kind of lily pads to stretch out your range so you can cover a much longer area. You can launch drones from them, both aerial and sea drones. So, I mean, you provide command and control over a large area of the sea. So this is a different operation for the Marines, something I really think they should be looking at more. We tend to think of them as, we're going to do the D-Day landing type style, and that's not what we're seeing here. Much different application of force. And again, it creates concern because if you're Maduro and the Venezuelans, you got to be wondering, where are they? What are they doing next?
That's really helpful because I think in so much, to include my reporting, when you hear the number of Marines going down in amphibious ready group, that is where the mindset goes, is these are ground pounders to a degree. How many can they get ashore quickly? But outlining kind of the other capabilities is probably the priority here. Makes a lot more sense. You started to hit on this, the impact to global trade or the shipping lanes there. This was apples to oranges between what was happening to the Houthis and what's happening here, but a side effect of the Houthi attacks there was a lot of shipping just started going elsewhere. Is it too early at this point to tell if there's any impact here off the coast of Venezuela, or would you expect any sort of impact?
We haven't seen it yet. And one of the things we have to remember is it's not a matter of creating, direct kinetic strikes on shipping. What you do is it's just a threat of shipping. It's the threat of a minefield. You need zero mines to create a threat of a minefield. You just need the threat, and then you create the problem. And if you start diverting ships, if ships can't sail past the coast of Venezuela, they have to take a longer route. That costs money. More importantly, if all of a sudden sailing through the Caribbean becomes a war zone, then do you have to start paying insurance for that? That adds costs on top of everything. Venezuela is not very close to the Panama Canal, but they are potentially within range of the Panama Canal. So that's a major choke point for the United States. And so there's concern about any action against Venezuela. Venezuela can take action, either against shipping, against Guyana or Colombia on their borders, or against this plethora of ships sailing off their coast. And again, one of the concerns I had about the Houthi strikes is this is a textbook operation for anybody to see how can we impact the West, the United States. Because again, the Houthi didn't do that by themselves. They were backed by the Iranians. Does the Venezuelans have somebody who backed them that can provide them with this? And I got to imagine the Venezuelans can be out there on the market looking for weapons and kind of the ordnance they can use to create strikes against shipping. There's U.S. ships going, past there all the time. And one of the things I said in my first video, when the U.S. was sending ships down to Venezuela, was we had just loaded oil out of Venezuela to the United States. There were 2 Chevron tankers that just came out of Venezuela and brought oil to the United States. So it was a very weird moment. It's like we're putting naval forces off the coast of Venezuela. At the same time, Chevron's hauling oil out of Venezuela for the United States to refine. So our policy here is very mixed. But my concern in my channel, and what I look at is that impact on global shipping, is whenever you create this kind of attack, which we saw, and we're very public about this attack, the president posting it, that starts raising concerns like what happens next when it comes to shipping. Do the Venezuelans strike at a U.S. commercial ship, for example, coming through the region? There's a lot of U.S. vessels in and around this region, private vessels, commercial vessels. There's tourism in the area. There's oil platforms, not just Venezuela, but other oil platforms in the area. There's the Panama Canal. This is a potential area we have to watch very carefully for what the reaction is coming out of Venezuela.
Which hasn't really been anything so far from what I've seen. And that's an interesting difference here is we went after according to the statement from the president, a group of narco traffickers from Trinidad. Venezuela may not be very interested in claiming that as one of their own. So they're kind of in a tough spot, let alone reacting to that and responding. So, yeah, it's a concern. Hopefully we don't end up there. It feels like there's still a little wiggle room.
I agree. And Venezuela's got to be careful about that. It's like, do you want to claim these people? It's like, no, I really don't. Because then, again, that gives the government, U.S. government sanction against this agency. So it creates a big problem. But the problem we see is again, well, then maybe this terrorist organization gets weapons they can strike against ships. It's not Venezuela doing it. It's TAD striking against them, a la the Houthi. And now we create this kind of non-state player who's out there now striking at things. It's a very dangerous avenue to get into, and the high seas, this international waters does create some problems, as we've seen, because the Houthi have been able to justify their attacks against shipping because their argument is we're helping defend, the people of Gaza against Israel, and we're targeting ships that are supporting Israel, even if indirectly, they do a 6 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon sometimes to find connections with their ships. That's a fear I do have, that this could escalate in the Caribbean.
All right. Well, good news. It hasn't gotten there yet. But Sal, thank you so much for taking the time to walk through all this, man. This was really, really helpful.
Preston, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon, man. All right. So thank you again so much to Sal for taking the time to run through all of that. This was a really good example, for me at least, of I don't know what I don't know until I start asking some of those questions. And Sal really did a good job, I think, of kind of opening up a lot more possibilities of what exactly is playing out here. So be sure to check out his channel, linked in the description below, as well as his profile on X or Twitter. Whether this continues in this kinetic role and we see more lethal strikes, or if it transitions into more of a kind of traditional counter-narcotics police type operation, I'm certain that Sal is going to be staying on top of it. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.